I'm Alma Langlois, and today I'm talking about the true one-of-a-kind all-American auteur. A combat photographer turned pinup photographer. A gruff, macho, flag-waving, anti-drug patriot and lover of Dixieland jazz and silent movies. The man who is both declared the American Fellini and a man who proudly proclaims things like, "I love farting." I'm talking about the one and only Russ Meyer, and today's slice of pure cinema is his most profitable film, Vixen. Thanks to a collaboration between the good people at Severin Films and RM Productions, his Vixen trilogy is finally available in beautiful restorations on 4K. Russ had an obsession.
Oh, you know I love big titties.
And he elevated his obsessions into surreal exploitation art, directing, photographing, editing, and sometimes co-writing all of his work. He explained his career simply as, "I have my fantasies. I put them on film." Russ Meyer was born in 1922 in San Leandro, California. There was something about Northern California around that time that was churning out a lot of unique creative personalities. Sam Peckinpah, Clint Eastwood, and Shirley Jackson, just to name a few. Russ's father, an Oakland police officer, was absent for most of his childhood. It is no coincidence that cops are usually villains in Russ Meyer's movies. He was raised by his domineering and unstable mother, Lydia, who some sources claim was married at least 6 times. But despite her flaws, she was always supportive of young Russ's interest in film and photography, even hawking her engagement ring to buy him an 8mm camera. He had one sister, Lucinda, who unfortunately battled schizophrenia and was institutionalized starting in her teens. Keeping a promise to his mother, Russ always took care of her. At 19, to escape the misery and poverty of his home life, Russ volunteered as a combat photographer. World War II would become one of the largest influences on Meyer's life. He adored the freedom it offered him, the camaraderie with his fellow soldiers who became the family he never had, and he relished combat photography, some of his work even appearing in the Oscar-winning film Patton. And it was during World War II that Russ lost his virginity to a large-breasted French hooker, he claims thanks to Ernest Hemingway. "I really didn't want the war to end," Meyer said. "It was the best time I ever had." Vixen star Erica Gavin said, "I don't remember him ever telling stories about growing up and doing this or that with his mother. To me, it was like Russ's life started when he was in the army. He was born, he popped out of uniform. There was no childhood." The genesis of Vixen came about in the place where all twisted and perverted ideas grow, the laundromat. Russ Meyer and frequent associate producer and war buddy Jim Ryan were bemoaning the intrusion of hardcore pornography, which posed a threat to the kind of sexploitation romps that Russ liked to make. Russ didn't oppose the showing of hardcore pornography, but he was not a fan. He found hardcore pornography aesthetically ugly, all, as he put it, roping sperm meeting an open-faced oyster, and insisted the women that they cast were too flat-chested. Besides, he said he'd never make a hardcore porn because his mother wouldn't like it. The second threat came from Hollywood itself, which was now offering the nudity, violence, and taboo subjects normally only found in exploitation films. Thinking of the Fox, the Canadian 20th Century Fox lesbian melodrama starring Sandy Dennis, Russ declared to Jim Ryan that, "We have to make the sexiest film ever made. One that was wall-to-wall eroticism and including hot-button topics like incest, lesbianism, communism, and racism." With the writing help of Robert Ruddleson, who had written Finders Keepers, Lovers Weepers, Vixen was born. Stunning Erica Gavin stars as Vixen, a sexually voracious young woman running a vacationer's lodge in rural British Columbia with her guileless husband, Tom. But there's trouble in paradise of Canadian bush country.
Maybe you got cribs.
Vixen is in love with her husband, but his job as a bush pilot means he's often gone from home, leaving the foxy nymphomaniac to quench her burning fires with every man, woman, and mountie she encounters. And she does things with a fish you dare never dream of. There's also Vixen's brother Judd, who's a member of the one biker gang that would probably get beaten up by the Black Widows.
Right turn, Clyde.
And his friend Niles, an American living in Canada in opposition to the Vietnam War. Niles is the only man that racist Vixen does not want to sleep with. She hurls a lot of antiquated racial slurs his way, and he laughs most of those off since she seems to think it's still 1925. But he gets incensed when she accuses him of being a draft dodger.
Since you are of draft age and a United States citizen and for some mysterious reason refuse to go back to your own country.
There ain't nothing mysterious about my reasons.
Like how you got so black on the outside when you're so yellow on the inside?
Judd tries to encourage Vixen to have sex with Niles, but she says she'd rather get jiggy with him.
That's really sick.
Then about 40 minutes into the film, we get some plot intruding on the story when O'Banion, a shady Irish communist, shows up, trying to manipulate Niles into helping him hijack a plane into Cuba.
I am a communist.
Vixen struck a chord with American audiences, and with its budget of $68,000, grossed a total of $7 million domestically. This helped kick the door open for Russ at 20th Century Fox, where he would make 2 films, including Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, before returning to his independent roots. Vixen is filmed in Meyer's unique visual style, filled with bright colors, wall-to-wall music, and what critics like to refer to as his staccato editing style. Rather than dolly or zoom, which would involve more time and budget for camera setups, Meyer uses quick cuts as a more economical choice, and to give the film the kinetic energy he loves. And I love how he photographs women. The way they're lit and made up, the way he frames and poses them, they always look their most glamorous and beautiful. This is also the first of Russ's films where he uses surreal cutaways and his trademark shot, beloved by him but hated by his actresses, of the camera peering up through the box springs. With its story of a woman who's deeply in love with her husband, but overwhelmed by sexual compulsion she can't control, Vixen could easily be a tragedy, much like the similarly themed Fuego.
You're still number one.
Miss number 2?
Oh, honey, you know what I mean. Nobody could satisfy me like you do.
I also thought it was implied that both Vixen's nymphomania and racism stem from the same past trauma, possibly a rape. She bristles whenever a man tries to touch her without her initiating, and when Judge teases her by holding her down and threatening to let Niles have his way with her, the look on her face is one of someone having a post-traumatic flashback. But despite the potentially heavy subject matter, the film keeps everything lighthearted. Vixen's nymphomania is viewed more as a character quirk. It never threatens her marriage, because Tom is so blissfully oblivious. And the film's reasoning seems to be, what Tom doesn't know won't hurt him.
Vixen's full of fun. She likes to tease a lot, but she knows where to draw the line.
Vixen is also portrayed as a sexual healer. Her seduction of both husband and wife of the unhappy married couple visiting the lodge ends up rekindling their marriage. Russ Meyer said with Vixen he wanted a girl to come on like a super chief. Much like Russ Meyer's other work, the voraciously sexual female who takes charge is the ideal, and the men around her are either too clueless or too weak to fully handle her. Quick aside while I'm talking about Meyer's powerful women, I've got to pay respects to the woman behind the man, Russ's second wife and producer, Eve Meyer. Atlanta, Georgia girl, she was a legal secretary turned pinup model turned producer with astonishing financial acumen. She loved to play poker, fish, and cook. In Jimmy McDonough's biography of Russ Meyer, he says of Eve, one of the very few women capable of swimming in the sea of finless predators known as the exploitation film business. Eve could spew forth the most vicious vitriolic letter to a deadbeat distributor, only to sign off with love and kisses, Eve Meyer. Only Southern women can do that. Mutual friend Irving Bloom said they were absolutely astonishing together. Where he was strong, she wasn't, and where she was strong, he wasn't. Even after they separated, she continued to produce Russ's films, this only ending with her death in a freak plane accident in 1977. If you were immediately turned off at the mention of a political subplot,
I told Dennis if he gives me another political topic, I'd spew burrito chunks.
have no fear. Unlike many films of the same era, there's zero political soapboxing to be found here. It's all done through a very glib Meyer-esque lens. And speaking of obnoxious political soapboxing from the 1960s, Meyer hated filmmaker Stanley Kramer, his former platoon mate. Kramer was responsible for a lot of sanctimoniously pseudo-liberal studio pictures that no one remembers anymore. Guess who's coming to dinner? Not me, because I projectile vomited in annoyance and then fell asleep.
You've got a weird sense of humor.
Try again, I get funnier.
Meyer claimed that Kramer was always moralizing about Mother Russia. But unlike Meyer, who was opposed to using the casting couch and protective of his actresses, Kramer was nothing but a petty chauvinistic womanizer, he says. O'Banion the communist is ultimately the villain in Vixen. He feigns concern to Niles about the plight of blacks in America, but, spoiler alert, he turns out to be a racist manipulating Niles for his own selfish ends. Russ particularly despised communists, I think because he saw them as posturing hypocrites. Meyer is far more sympathetic to Niles and his disillusionment due to the discrimination and abuse he's faced. He would bring back Harrison Page for his studio film, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, another Atlanta, Georgia native. The Peach State creates a lot of great people. Page had a knack for comedy, most famous for things like Ultraman, Super Train, and playing the irascible Captain Trunk on the unfortunately short-lived Sledgehammer.
Hammer! In my office right now!
Here he turns in a great performance in more of an angry young man role. But the biggest key to Vixen's success is leading lady Erica Gavin. She's absolutely gorgeous, and whatever she lacked in acting experience, she has in screen presence. And Vixen's iconic eyebrows are her doing, inspired by her burlesque act as a sexy Spanish bullfighter. And while sex in a Russ Meyer movie is usually played more for absurdist humor, Erica brings a sensuality to the film. I think this is one of the reasons Vixen ended up being popular with couples and women.
This is a dirty movie.
No, this is a movie that a lot of couples come to. All kinds of couples go here.
While Vixen also taps into male fantasies, Vixen represents the sexual power of women and a female sexual id.
So that's what my husband was after. Not bad. Not bad.
In a way, she's what every woman would fantasize about being. A carnal goddess desirable to all she encounters, free to indulge in her desires without any fears or emotional complications. Erica Gavin was born Donna Graff, a child of two actors in Los Angeles, California. Following her parents' traumatic divorce, Erica began smoking pot and dropping acid daily before running away from home at 17. When her artist boyfriend landed in jail for drug dealing, she turned to topless dancing to pay the bills. Recalling being abused by a neighbor at age 10, Gavin said, "Sex has always been a really weird thing for me because I was molested for a long period of time when I was a kid." At 19, she began dancing at The Losers, where she met and eventually befriended Meyer luminaries Tour Satana and Haji. Gavin and Meyer had a stormy relationship on set. She had very little acting experience, and Russ would either behave like a proud parent when she did something well, or gruff and bullying when he wanted her to step up her game. Some theorized that Meyer was tougher on Gavin because he nursed a secret crush on her. After being disillusioned by the numerous scummy sleazebags in the film industry,
These swinger types always seem to have money.
she knocked around on the fringes of the LA rock scene before entering the fashion world, managing an upscale boutique and then later becoming a buyer for Barney's. Gavin struggled with mental health, drug use, and anorexia in the 1980s. She said, "It was me wanting to become invisible so that no one would look at me anymore." That's really heartbreaking, especially because she seems like she's a really sweet person. But despite their tumultuous relationship, when she was having a particularly rough time, Gavin received an unexpected Christmas card from Russ with $300 inside. The sexual content in Vixen is a soft R today, but when it was released in 1968, Russ Meyer went to war against the censors. Each state and local community had their own laws about what was obscene and what could be exhibited publicly. Theater owners and projectionists in Georgia, Michigan, Florida, Illinois, and North Carolina were arrested just for showing Vixen. But the bloodiest battles of Vixen's censorship war were waged in Cincinnati, Ohio, thanks to one man. Charles Keating, who looks like a Grant Wood portrait of a walking embalmed corpse, was a politically connected lawyer.
Don't tell me about lawyers.
And a crusader against pornography, forming the Citizens for Decent Literature in 1958. Larry Flint, who would do his own battles against Keating, claimed the CDL provided a vehicle for its staff members to indulge their repressed obsession with smut in a socially sanctioned way, with the added bonus of publicly condemning it. Meyer's lawyer for obscenity charges, Elmer Gertz, was able to get nearly all the charges against Vixen dismissed via First Amendment defense. But in Ohio, Gertz found that Keating's family and political cronies ran Cincinnati, the newspapers, the courts, and the state attorney's office. He was even up against a rigid anti-pornography judge whose son was the prosecutor. In November, the judge granted a permanent injunction against Vixen in 5 Ohio counties on the grounds that it was obscene. In July 1971, the Ohio Supreme Court upheld the ban, and the Supreme Court refused to hear the case, although they did choose to screen the film. To this day, Vixen is technically still banned in Cincinnati. Keating later became a powerful figure in banking, but in 1993 he was convicted of fraud in the infamous Lincoln Savings and Loan scandal, having squandered the assets of elderly customers through risky investments, junk bond deals, and bad real estate schemes. Analysts said the failure of Lincoln Savings and Loan cost the taxpayers $2 billion in bailout funds. Meyer later found out, in gleefully reading a Los Angeles Times article about Keating's downfall, that Keating allegedly liked to stare down the blouses of his secretaries, and that at least a dozen of them were given bonuses to pay for boob jobs. Hell's fire burns hottest for hypocrites. Exploitation impresario Dave Friedman pointed out that it was the low-budget mavericks like Meyer who struck blows against censorship, while the major studios didn't so much as lift a finger. Isn't that always the way? Join me next time as I continue Russ Meyer Month with Russ's magnum opus to all his mammary obsessions.
Tits? What's this tits business?
Super Vixens. But until next time, stay sick.